Top 10 reasons why you should bring chaff. Number 1. You know, a lot of people may disagree with me here, but I still think the F-4E is a very viable aircraft. Especially now that the battle ratings are being moved up again. At 11.0, this thing is not going to see the 4th generation monsters that it currently faces in the Matchmaker. But even then, it still doesn't necessarily not stand a chance against them. It's not meta-defining by any means, and it hasn't been ever since, you know, the F-14 came to the game, and boy was that fun. But, I mean, let's take a look at the F-4. What makes it what it is? Well, for one, the radar you have is actually pretty decent despite not having pulse Doppler. This can still make you a little bit threatening in radar combat, though you can't necessarily see people cruising along on the deck. But even then, pulse Doppler radars are still weak to this, as if somebody's low enough, the missile will just slam into the ground. Minor inconvenience, sure, but this is probably the weakest part of the F-4E's kit. In an 11-3 game or a down tier though, the F-4E can still be pretty threatening in BVR situations. Well, let's look at what else the F-4E has. In terms of IR missiles, I definitely prefer the F-4E in the Israeli tech tree, as it replaces the AIM-9Js with AIM-9Gs. The Navy Sidewinders are much more useful in my opinion, as they kind of just do everything the AIM-9J wants to do, but better. And while the AIM-9J is kinda mid, it's definitely still passable as a top-tier infrared missile. The elephant in the room, though, is your thrust-to-weight ratio and Agile Eagle. What do the two top tiers just introduced not have? High-speed maneuverability. And guess what Agile Eagle gives you? High-speed maneuverability. I don't think I could have hit that shot in any other plane known for pulling AOA, besides maybe the Viggen, as both the F-4E and the Viggen keep their speed a lot better than something like a MiG-21 or a J-8 when you're in a high-speed overshoot situation, which is some of the most potent situations for a gun kill or an off-bore sight close-range missile kill that they can't really react to. This video is also a masterclass into why you should take chaff at top tier. I can't count the number of times that I lock somebody up to fire an AIM-7E2 at them, and not having chaff, they just had to kind of watch it fly into them with basically no counterplay, as they were too high up or too slow to dive back down to the deck. Even though the Israeli F-4 can replace its AIM-7E2s with extra AIM-9Gs, I actually don't end up using this feature and still take the 4 AIM-7E2s and the 4 AIM-9Gs. If you're an F-4 enjoyer, you really need to get the Israeli one. It's so nice to have AIM-9Gs, as they really fit the playstyle of the aircraft. I also just want to point out that when I launched this AIM-7E2, it was tracking the F-4EJ, but at some point after it stopped burning, it actually decided the F-104 ASA was the better radar signature. One thing that the F-4E is also very good at is scrapping. I absolutely hate this map because basically half the enemy team just rushes your airfield because they're placed side by side. But in the F-4E, I feel confident meeting them head on because I have a 0.86 thrust to weight ratio, which I'm pretty sure is in like the top 5 thrust to weight ratios for a jet fighter in the game. I have the luxury of actively giving an F-16 my 6, and by the time he's going to be able to turn around because he has a turn circle the size of Texas, I'm going to be far enough away that I have plenty of time to react to any sort of counterattack he wants to throw off. I do, though, get jump scared over this ridge by an F-4J that also wants to third-party me, but this is no problem as none of his missiles are threatening to me right now. And I do literally everything better than him. He's heavier than I am, does not have Agile Eagle, and that just lets me kind of sit behind him, pitch up. Yeah, he's screwed. The internal Vulcan is really nice as well. You don't have to rely on a gun pod, and I just kind of walk the tracers onto this guy with the boatload of ammo I have. Sure, the Vulcan isn't really a one-tap machine anymore, but it's still a very forgiving gun to use. You have a massive 6,000 rounds per minute fire rate, and the close range velocity is very easy to work with. You can put 7 to 8 rounds into people in quick succession, and they just kind of fall into the ground and die. This here is also yet another clip of why you should learn to defend missiles properly. This guy does not cut his afterburner at all. Even though he's flaring, I expected this to get flared because he's an F5, but yeah, it still just finds the afterburner. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, how does this thing even compete against the F-14? The AIM-7E2 isn't a long-range missile, and yeah, you would be right about that. If you can push them off of their angle though, spook them at all into changing what they're doing. You have free reign to run them down. They have a higher top speed on the deck, so maybe not there, but when you're at altitude like I am, you have way more speed to work with, and considering you have a higher thrust to weight ratio, the moment in which I reach my rip speed and he starts running away from me will never come, just like your girlfriend. No, that's a joke. I'm kidding. War Thunder players don't have relationships. I don't know why people are so insistent to not run chaff at top tier. It's like the meta or something right now. I don't know. But it greatly benefits aircraft like the F-4E, which have a high quantity of radar missiles. This F-5C, though, is kind of writing me off as I haven't fired a missile at him yet, and if you don't shoot a missile at somebody for a while, they kind of forget you exist. I actually shoot a heat seeker at him, and he just doesn't flare it at all. I lock up this F-8E in front of me, and I actually had a nice fan interaction with him. Don't worry, you won't get caught lacking in the no RWR plane. He actually, dodged it. You guys saw that, right? Make sure to comment on how epically he dodged that missile. I think the main thing that a lot of F4 players forget is that you're allowed to not go into bad situations. As cool as it is to be, you know, first in, last out, it also kind of somewhat a little reduces your ability to come out of the game alive. You're allowed to single people out who put themselves in bad positions. And that really goes for basically any top tier. I promise you, just whittling down the enemy team one by one is still just as effective. And specifically for the case of the F-4E, you don't have to have the best dogfight performance to still be generally helpful to your team. You just have to be survivable. If you can get past somebody's first attack, the F-4E is generally very good at making a counterattack. Also, once again, remember to run chaff. This guy has no chance to dodge this AIM-7E2. One thing a lot of people don't know is that despite not having pulse Doppler, you're not useless against chaff. CW, or continuous wave-guided missiles, can still somewhat see the Doppler effect, and because of this, they will attempt to ignore chaff as long as you maintain your lock. The missile guides to the largest signature within a threshold, and chaff generally tends to not be a part of that threshold. So even though you may be physically locking the chaff, the missile is a lot of the time still guiding into your target. Also, I'm looking down right now, and despite not having pulse Doppler, I managed to maintain a lock. When looking directly down, the target is actually in front of the clutter, letting you still sparrow people from directly above, assuming, I guess, they're not inside of the trees. And finally, generally, if you're taking radar combat with somebody, learn to crank. This is keeping the radar missile off of the very edge of your radar, so that you can put more distance between you and anybody in front of you, so that anything shot at you is closer to the notch and has more distance to travel. That's all for this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'd actually like to request that you subscribe on Patreon as well. I have some big life changes coming up that are gonna leave me financially vulnerable, so if you want me to keep posting banger content, you guys are the lifeblood of the channel. All the support you can give helps. Other than that, that's all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.